everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 20 of 86. So, 4 episodes to go, right? I noticed online, I luckily, Mevlin, aka Cyber, has been giving me the fan sub translations for these episodes, which I really appreciate. But back when I was looking at the streaming service, I noticed there were a lot of little like 19.5 and like 21.5, and I was like, why are there all these little half episodes? Are they actually OVAs, or are they, just recaps? And why are there so many? And some people on YouTube have been talking about how because of COVID, production kind of was halted for months, which that sucks. That sucks a lot. I can't imagine, especially if you were really into a show and then suddenly it's like, oh, hey, I know you just watched this really cliffhangery episode, but now you have to wait 2 months to find out what happened. And you're like, excuse me? So I definitely can relate to the people that were like, ugh, and having to wait, and then them doing like a recap episode. I don't like a recap episode. I hate recap episodes, especially when you're reacting, because like you're watching it in real time and you're going through the motions. So like, why would you want to stop and watch a recap? So I'm glad I'm not doing that, but thank you all on YouTube for pointing that out. I have some comments before we start. So before we start about this, some really good comments from Lena and C. Davis, as well as some people on YouTube, pointing out some things that are really interesting. One being like, Linux was pointing out, I'm glad Linux that you said this, because I went on a bit of a rant. I think it was episode 17, maybe 16 or 17, where I went on a rant about the 86 go away graffiti that was made. And Linux was like, well, during the battle, the people there in San Magnolia, they just wrote that on there because they thought that the 86 were attacking them and not the Legion, because they wouldn't know any different. The government's not telling them that it's the Legion. But I thought about that, and at first I was like, oh, okay. But then I thought about that, and my counter to that is, one, the government not knowing it was a Legion attack, they've known the whole time, because it's on the news every single day that the Legion are at war with them and that the drones are attacking. So as far as the people are concerned, they don't even know about District 86, or if they do, they don't, they're kind of like out of sight, out of mind. They don't want to acknowledge it. So is that suggesting that everyone has known that 86 is fighting for them all along? But then, like, no, I don't think that works. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because then it's like, why would it be a big secret? Why would it be a big secret? The government has to keep secret that there's no casualties if everyone in the city knows the 86 are fighting for them and they think it's a rebellion. That doesn't make any sense. So that doesn't work. They clearly should know it's Legion. But then also my other reasoning was that they should have no time. If there is if I don't care if it's 86 or Legion, if there's an apocalyptic enemy coming at me, the last thing I'm gonna do is stop running away, get out my spray paint, and do some graffiti. Nobody's doing that. That's such a dumb thing. No. Why would you be like, oh my God, I could die at any moment, but this isn't gonna make any difference, but let me put this tag on this sign. That'll stop them from attacking us. No, that's dumb. I'm sorry. But I was like, no, it doesn't make the 86 go away sign is really stupid. I hate it. I'm like, it doesn't make any logical sense in this very realistic wartime show. That 86 go away sign makes no sense. I'm like, and I don't think anybody's ever going to convince me otherwise, because I'm like, logically speaking, it does not add up. But thank you for trying. I'm glad you put that out there. Thank you for trying and offering your opinions. And then there was a couple other things. I did like C. Davis's comment about how about Richard and the whole, like, I do love that line in the episode. I think it's episode 18. Sharp knife, use it until it breaks. It reminds me of Oikawa and Haikyuu saying hit it until it breaks. The idea that you use something until it's gone. And kind of to relate to that, I do appreciate the offering of the idea of keeping, I do agree that Richard, it seems, was trying to keep them all separated to help protect them. He just doesn't want to admit it, right? He doesn't want to admit that he wants to protect the 86 because it seems to be a common thought that they shouldn't be protected. And Wenzel kind of points it out like, you're trying to protect them in your own way, you know? We're not going to connect that to Uncle Who Shall Not Be Named. But I do understand that, and I do respect it. I guess my big beef, like I talked about in the episode, was that we just didn't get to see the 86's reaction to it, because they just act like, oh, we've been together for years, and well, they've been together for like 6 months, but they've been through hell and back, and then suddenly they're separated, and they're like, okie dokie, this country that we've just come into, they want to separate us. We're not going to question it at all. We're not even going to talk about it. And then I just wish we had seen more like internal monologue, more like conversations happening about it. Like, what do they think about that? I mean, even if it was just something as simple as Karina and Anju being like, we're getting separated, what does this mean? Like some kind of character development. Y'all know where I'm going with it. But I do understand the idea that Richard wanted to protect them. My whole thing was that C. Davis's comment was really good, and I liked their perspective, so thank you for putting that out there. But then somebody on YouTube somebody on YouTube was like, oh, well, because I was like, they're separating them to not show that they're strong, because if they're strong and it shows, then they'll be sent into this impossible task. And then somebody on YouTube brought up this, and then I went, wait a minute. Again, like the sign thing. They're like, oh, well, that's because the government didn't know about the morphos. So, because Sheen tried to say, you know, hey, there's this threat, and they were like, no, silly boy. We've done our analysts have done their work. There's no threat, whatever. And then it comes out, oh, wait, Sheen was right. There's been this morpho all along. So somebody on YouTube was like, oh, well, they didn't have a reason to put them together because the morpho wasn't known about yet. And I was like, wait a minute. So that made the whole separating them even less making sense, because hear me out. I'm like, if you told me if the morpho had been known all along, if they knew about the morpho, and Richard was trying to protect the 86 by saying, like, I want to keep them separate on different divisions, because if the higher-ups figure out that they work really good as a cohesive unit, they're going to get sent on a suicide mission to stop the morpho, and he was trying to protect them until they possibly found more information out or did something like that, then that makes sense. It's like, yeah, but the person on YouTube pointing out that the government didn't know about the morphos, I'm like, then why did it matter to separate them? What impossible? There wasn't an impossible task that they were going to be sent on at the moment, right? Because they're at war with Legion. Their whole point is to stop Legion. You can't just say, oh yeah, we're at war with this thing, but you know, we're going to wait in the wings and see how it works out. And we could end the war earlier rather than later by having this elite force go after them, but we're going to see if we can work this out first. There's none of that. So I was like, if you have no suicide mission, the thing about in 86's district is that the San Magnolia government knew that there was always a suicide mission to Legion headquarters. With Ray was always like the morpho. Ray was always the final boss. And the 86, the San Magnolia knew about it, and they kept sending 86 to Ray and his squadron, knowing they were going to get wiped out, and that was the point. So, yeah, it's nice that Richard is trying to save them, which is contrasting against San Magnolia, but at the same time, that doesn't make sense because there was no Ray version with the morpho yet, right? There was no final boss that Giad could have been sending them to until it actually happens. And by that point, they're already back together. So there was no keeping them separate at that point. So I'm just like, no. Unless the novel does it differently and the anime has just not adapted it as the novel is. I'm like, there was no point in keeping them separate because there was no morpho to face at the time. There was no impossible task. And it's like, I get divide and conquer, I guess. Divide and conquer, split them up and have them each perform their duty to help each of those little divisions. Yeah, that would make sense, but that's not Richard protecting them. That's them using the 86 to help out in those divisions. So the meaning does change a little bit. So, yeah. I'm just like, I appreciate when people were trying to like explain why things were happening, and then I thought about it and I was like, but that just makes it more convoluted. So I was like, I don't know. And to be fair, I don't know anything about, you know, military culture. I don't know anything about military strategies, things like that. It just, logically speaking, some things didn't quite add up. And I was like, okay. But, you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. I'm really excited to read volumes 1 through 3 and make note of, my whole thing is everybody's like, oh, don't read volume 1 because there's spoilers. And I'm like, well, then what the heck is volume 2 and 3 going to be? Is it going to spoiler beyond season 1? I don't know. I don't know, but we'll get there. But in any case, I'm really excited to dive into this episode. I've talked enough. I appreciate the comments. I do appreciate the different perspectives. I do like hearing the different rationale, especially people that like have military experience or study military history. That part is really cool. Like seeing some real life examples. There was something else commented by C. Davis too that I thought was neat in the idea of the fantastical element that, you know, they were like, there have been in history like elite squads sent to go take care of certain antagonistic forces. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. Like, I am aware, and I like learning about that. It's just, I think for me, and I know this intro is taking forever, I think for me, the thing of it is, when this series started, we set up the Legion. The Legion was like on this level, and our 86 were on this level, and them meeting head to head, there were all of this death and destruction amongst the 86 and the Legion, and it kind of made sense, and it felt very realistic, right? But now we have less 86 and more advanced Legion, and the scaling is not as balanced as it was before. And before we were having traction, but that all made sense. Now the power scaling is so different, but suddenly these guys down here are supposed to trump the ones that are here. That's where the fantastical anime part comes. It's be like, well, there are protagonist groups, so they're not going to fail. Even though logically speaking, in terms of the show, they by all accounts technically should. And I know that some people's going to comment and say, oh, well, the Regan Leafs or whatever are they're much better than the Juggernauts, and that's why they're up to that level. And if that's the case, that makes sense. If the Regan Leafs and the Morphos are kind of on the same level, and it's not this anymore, if they were still in those old Juggernauts, it'd make no sense. But the fact that they're in like the higher tech equipment, I'll give you that. That makes sense completely. I guess it's just, you know, the numbers game is a lot different than it was at the beginning, but the technology being upscaled does make that add up. So I'll give you all that. I'm done talking about my conspiracy corner, and I'm ready to start this episode and see what we get. So when we last left off, Kiri and his Morpho was running away, but he's bound and determined to make everyone isolated and make them suffer like he has. How that works. And then Sheen and the others are deciding to go after the Morpho, because if they let it go, it's going to be able to fire its laser beam, and we don't want it to fire its laser. That would be a very bad thing. So we'll see how that goes. But we aren't going to waste any more time. I've talked way too long. We're going to start episode 20 of 86, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Okay, this episode felt so interesting because we only have 3 episodes left of the season, and this very much felt like the calm before the storm episode. But they're heading towards Morpho, they're heading towards Kiri. Sheen doesn't think he's living, which is like, I think Lena's gonna make sure that you live up to your promise, sir. I don't think she's gonna let you get out of this dead. The one thing that's so interesting about all this is we have no clue what Lena's doing. They try to be like, well, I guess the Republic's gone. I guess Lena's dead. I guess nobody's gonna come. And we all know Lena's gonna come in there Deus Ex Machina style. That's why she's in the damn OP like that. That we know it's gonna happen. I really wish the OP didn't have that last image at the very end of her and him looking at each other. Even though I love that image, it's my favorite part of the OP. It just reminds me that she's gonna come in and be a Deus Ex Machina and show up at the last minute somehow. The only thing that I get worried about is that I'm like, are they going to be able to explain how she got there? Or is the season going to end with her showing up and saving them, and then they see each other and boom, that's the end of the season? Because that will be so frustrating if we didn't see her this entire time, and then the season will not, if the season doesn't give us answers and show us how she got there, and then it's just them looking at each other and we have to, and that's the end. I will have problems. I don't know. I don't know. But let's talk about this episode. This episode had some really good moments to it. Some parts that I was like tilting my head at, but I did really like a large part of it. I like that we got the explanation of the planes just disappearing. I thought they were exploding, like when we first saw that October 9th date come up and the plane just like poofed. I thought it was blown up and I was like, oh, that was kind of jarring. Like, oh no, what are we supposed to do with that? But no, they're taking Legion technology and developing it. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So like, according to that boy with the strange powers, so time since the operation started, 11 hours. This episode, again, it jumps through a lot of time. Like we go from 11 hours after the operation to 44 hours. So we cut through a large portion of time. But they say, according to the boy with the strange powers, the Morphos stopped on the tracks in the Southern Legion held territory. Okay, knowing that I'm just gonna go ahead and say it this episode and get it out there. Knowing that the studio is facing some constraints with COVID and production, I'm curious if that's the reason that the set pieces in this episode are really stagnant. Like, we spend the first chunk with just these two characters standing there looking out in the sunset. There's no movement. There's no animation. It's just them sitting there. We see planes blowing up or not blowing up, but getting covered by the clouds. There's like no change. And I'm not going to lie, there was a few moments in this episode I was like, I really wish something would happen. I was sitting there going, because it just felt like reading a novel. It felt like an audiobook. Like, I'm just sitting there like, okay, nothing. Now, granted, the Raiden scene, the scene with Raiden, Sheen, and the other onlookers, that's the best part of the episode, hands down. I was like, yes, that's the meat, that's the crux of the episode. But like the ending with Frederica and the part in the tent, and there just wasn't a lot of movement in the animation this episode, and we're used to that. So I'm like, can things happen? It just felt kind of like an exposition dump at times, and I wanted there to be like animation and stuff happening. But if the studio was under a time crunch when that was going on, then that would explain why they didn't animate a lot of this, because maybe they were just trying to like, let's get by with the least we can and make it work. And I can't fault it for that, because I'm like, I'm sure somebody has analyzed the symbolism of Mantis Man and Richard standing here overlooking the sunset skies, and there's the pillars, and the gate is crushed, and then when they come back again at nighttime in the same damn pose, they just flip, and Richard's on one side and Mantis Man is on the other, which is really annoying. We don't have his name. Really annoying, but I'm sure there's a reason. But I just, it was kind of, I don't want to say lazy is the word for the animation, but it was, yeah, kind of. There wasn't enough symbolically for it to represent, to mean something. So it was just like, let's stick these two guys on screen, have them not even face each other and talk half the time. It's just the back of their heads. It's like the animation studio did not have to do much this episode. There was not a lot of animation going on, which you got constraints. You got to do what you got to do. But this was probably, I think, of all the episodes I've watched so far, the least visually appealing out of the whole series. And I was like, ooh. It just kind of was, it was very noticeable, and it's not been noticeable before. But it had some really good scenes, so I want to talk about those with y'all. But I would be remiss not to mention that, to be like, oh God, there was like, I could have watched this on audiobook, and I think I wouldn't have missed anything. That's my point. All the other episodes, we've had some really good animation and great action sequences that you want to see visually. Here, I could have plugged this in and just listened to it through my car and not watched anything, and I wouldn't have missed much. So that's why I just point that out there. But yeah, so you talk about the Confederacy, their main force, as well as the Alliance, are advancing to take the area around the tracks. So basically we're setting up like we're going to, and the United Kingdom of Goa is going to be working with another, what do they say there? With another smaller Confederacy unit to take the tracks on the north side. So basically trying to surround Legion and surround the Morpho while they attack it, basically. I wondered if Richard and Mantis Man were of the same ethnicity, because they both have the same colored eyes and the same color hair. So are they from like the same place? Because we determine ethnicities by hair color in this world. So maybe that's it. And they're like, the United Kingdom volunteered to be a diversion throughout all of this. But if the main army advances, then the Legion's not going to miss that, right? So what's our plan? Like, yeah. So, like, here's the thing. Like, this whole time they're talking with this exposition, I would have been cool to, like, actually go to the places where they're setting up and see that happening. Like, it would have been neat to go to a shot of the Alliance setting up this anti-radar weapon. It would have been nice to go to the front lines and see Goa and the others setting up. Like, there needed to be some kind of, like, movement and seeing the set pieces, seeing everything set up. Instead, we just have these two guys standing there, like, in wide shot, looking straight ahead and talking. But it makes it a little bit hard to, like, keep up. But anyway, it disperses clouds of small metal particles in the air, kind of like the jamming communications among the legions, all that good stuff. And then they talk about, yeah, if they use everything they have, the hope is they can buy enough time for the Legion to identify the forces. Okay, so basically everybody's got together. The Legion learned fast, so we only got like a one-time shot at this, or they're going to figure out what we've done, and we're going to be screwed. Basically is what they're getting at. He's like, if we lose this, it's over. What else can we do? We're down to the nitty gritty, right? Everyone's forced to do whatever it takes, huh? I'm like, yeah, it's war. What do you think? You know? And then we have the opening. So, yeah. That was kind of my thing, too, when we talked about the 86. It's like, yeah, that's all they know is the battlefield, but you're in the middle of war. I mean, you want to win that, right? Okay, we'll get past the OP. Okay, so meanwhile, we have Sheen, who seems like he's veering into the Legion and kind of showing that they fell for the diversion. It's 12 hours now, so it's been about an hour, and they're talking about being the force on the move. Now, the part with Raiden up here is probably my favorite part of the episode. It's definitely the most dynamic, but my boy Sheen. My questionable boyfriend for Lena. I'm like, Lena, you got your work cut out for you. This boy's a fixer-upper. You sure you want to date this? He's hot, but you sure you want this? He's a lot. Because I'm like, you sure you don't want Raiden? I'd almost support Lena and Raiden more. Raiden's a little bit more stable than Sheen. And he's like, I don't care if they catch up. But saying he doesn't care if the Legion catches up. And then this is where I get where Raiden is coming from. Raiden's like, look, Sheen, you take Frederica and you go back. But I'm like, bitch, you knew the moment that you suggested that to Sheen that wasn't going to fly. You knew that wasn't going to happen. You knew he was not going to take Frederica back. You know that. He is dedicated. Sheen has said the entire time he was going to follow you all till the end and be the one to possibly kill you if Legion gets to you first. You knew, Raiden, that Sheen was not going to take Frederica and go back. You knew the moment that left your lips that it was not going to happen. And he's like, you know why. Somebody needs to get her past the Legion without being found. And I appreciate that Raiden tries to, like, use some logic here, being like, you are technically the most apt and best to get her back, which is not a lie. It is the truth. He's like, only you can do it. And it's like, and Sheen's like, well, what about us pursuing? And he's like, if he can only move on the tracks, then I like we have Pont de Bleu. We got like a little blue. It doesn't mean Blue Point there if it was French. He says we can probably track him just through our parade. I hadn't thought about that. I thought the parade was I thought that the parade wasn't in existence anymore since they took the chip out and they have the implant in the neck. I thought that was not a thing anymore, but maybe it was just they can't connect to the Republic, but they can connect amongst themselves. Mantis Man makes the note that they've developed the technology to use the parade with the Federacy, so maybe they can use it, and it's just not been talked about as much, right? He says, fortunately, unlike last time, someone is making a big distraction for us. I like that Raiden says, look, we have the ability to leave. We have more people on our side than we did before. We have people that are in the trenches, not just on the other side of a screen like San Magnolia was. Things are a little bit different this time. We can afford to have you go back with Frederica, if that's the case. But you knew Sheen wasn't going to do that. You knew that wasn't going to be the case. And Sheen kind of smiles and he's like, you think the Legion's going to be forced to use all their forces to deal with the diversion, but that's not the case. You know from the last time we passed through that fighting means instant death. The last time we went through that territory. So it's better than, and he's like, well, it's better than having you lead us the way that you are. So Raiden is saying like, yeah, you know what? you think that you need to lead us because it's been like before, but he's like, you're being reckless. And you went off last time without us. And that's a problem. And we don't want you to do that again. So you take Frederica back and we're of the calmer minds. We'll handle this. It's kind of like Raiden saying, you know, yeah, you're like, oh, well, it defeats the purpose of me being your Reaper if I have to take Frederica back. But Raiden's like, you're not being our Reaper now. You're getting obsessed with this and going after Kiri with this death wish. He's like, you're no help to us the way you are at the moment. You've always been crazy, but that last fight was too much. Yeah, you weren't listening anymore. He's like, something has control of you. And I don't know if it's this ghost knight that you've never met, but what's gotten into you? And Sheen says nothing. And I'm like, and Sheen had the opportunity to open up and talk. And he eventually does open up a little bit to Frederica, but I'm hoping the novel gives us more insight into the internal monologue with Sheen, because Sheen just being like, nothing's wrong. I'm like, well, clearly something is. Are you going to talk to us about it? And then he doesn't. I'm with Raiden. I'm like, Baka, speak. I'm like, I do like the symbolism that we have the symmetrical, the bridge, we have the dissecting of where they're at, the bisecting beams and the way the angles are. It visually looks really good. And then you have under them the two train tracks. One's going straight and one's veering off. And Sheen is the one that's veering off and Raiden is going like the straight and narrow. He's like, we've known each other a long time and I can see a few things that you can't yourself. You're a mess that you can barely stand. He's like, you don't see what a hot mess you are. He's back to when we first met. You weren't opening up to anybody. And you're like the name everyone calls you. We're just the Reaper, a ghost. And he's like, well, then the rest of you can take her and go. And there's a part of it that's like, Sheen almost wants to take all the burden for himself and go off and do it himself. And let them get out of there, because he's like, you all have futures that you can go after. I don't have a future that I want to go after. I don't have anything that I want to attain at this point. You guys all have these dreams and aspirations. You guys take her and go back. I'll handle the Morpho on my own. He wants me anyway, so what does it matter? He's like, I'd rather follow it myself than take someone who's going to slow me down. And Raiden's like, excuse me. He's like, it's a one-way mission, so it's better I go myself. There's no need to follow a path of no return. And I like that Raiden gets really mad. And he's like, what do you mean it's a one-way mission? And I like that it just like, now they're in between the train tracks. They're both going straight. And he's like, they're all in the same panel now too. And I love the way that his eyes are in this scene. Like the animation in this scene, for all that it gets kind of lazy in this episode, the shot, the close-up between Raiden and Sheen, where we see Sheen's eyes move around, is really well done. Like where he's like, don't think you can keep everybody else alive by doing this. He's like, is that your goal? And I like that Sheen slowly looks up at him like, is that what you think this is? And I'm like, oh shit, no. Like, what do you mean one-way mission? He's like, don't talk like you're not coming back. And Sheen just is like, I'm not planning to die. And it's just like, Raiden's like, yeah, you say you're not planning to die, but you're not planning to come back either. So that's kind of the same thing. He's like, how is that any different? Ugh. He's like, why did you kill your brother? What was the point? I thought it was so you could keep moving forward and not be drugged back by him. So why? And then I think Sheen's like, well, now I don't have anything to move forward to. My brother's gone. My family's gone. He's like, it wasn't just to kill your brother, was it? And we get the close-up of his scar. And then Sheen says, then why? Why did he do it? What was the point? I'm like, is Lena gonna have to show up and show you what you're living for? Is she gonna have to show up and get you through this? I feel like she's gonna have to show up and get you through this. I feel like Lena needs to. I'm like, girl, get him. I'm like, he's kind of needy, but get over here. He's kind of needy and doesn't think he has any right to live. Can you go over here and knock some sense into him, please, girl? I'm just waiting for Lena to do this. Be like, girl, is he worth your time? He's so dark and brooding. I'm like, Sheen, my dude, I know you're a tortured soul. You tortured soul. He would be the angsty emo kid writing in his diary, being like, I don't see the purpose in life. I'm like, oh, Sheen, come on now. I'm like, girl, I'm about to suggest you go ship with Raiden, because Sheen is a fixer-upper. Because, yeah, he doesn't answer the question, why did I? Why did I do it? And Raiden's like, I can't answer your question for you. I feel like the frustrating part of this scene where Sheen's like, why'd I do it? And we just see his eyes. The frustrating part is I feel the novel is going to give us some internal monologue, but this show doesn't believe in internal monologues. It doesn't. It does not believe we need to know anything internalized with the characters. And I'm like, we do. You can do that. You can do that. And I like Raiden saying, I don't want to die. I like Raiden acknowledging, being like, look, we've come all this way. We've done all this stuff. I don't want to die. I know that dying is a possibility, and I'm ready to meet that fate if it happens, but I'm not jumping into this on a death wish. He's like, that's all. He's like, and that should be enough. But he's like, I'm pretty sure the others feel the same way. And then, okay, so it zoomed out, so we see them behind the beam now. And Sheen, he's like, it's your path to walk, you decide. Raiden's like, we don't want to die, but it's up to you whether you do or not. And he's like, but we're traveling this same road together. And if you're exhausted, we'll support you. And if you're tired, then rest. Don't take it all by yourself. And then they separate. And I'm like, you would think this would be something common knowledge, but it's a well-known anime trope. The loner character's like, I don't need anybody. And it's like, bitch, you do. I feel for Raiden. Raiden's probably my favorite of the five because you can see the wheels turning in his head. You can see where he's coming from. He has the most development out of all five of these characters. And Sheen is the most broody and mysterious, but I'm just like, Sheen, quit being a bitch and do something. And here's my thing. And I was thinking about this the other day, where Theo's like, it's being like I'm left out, right? Like I'm not being treated like a fellow guy. I'm like, oh, don't be more feminist, Theo. And yeah, they have known each other for a long time. Supposedly a lot happened before he met them. I'm like, I wish we know more about that. I wish we could see more about them. Instead, the show is just like, yeah, stuff happened. You'll find out eventually. And I'm like, when? Yeah, no, like, is that how it is? Karina is hilarious, though. I like that Karina was gonna, like, go after them. I'm like, but I'm glad Anju stopped her, because, like, seriously, what would Karina have done? She would have made it worse. She's like, you tried to run over and interrupt them. That's why we had to stop you. I like Frederica's like, you were like a little dog. Yeah, you'd make things more complicated. And then, of course, Raiden and Shin go separate ways. I like they're both like, ugh. My thing is, at this point in the series, we've been here 23, well, not 23 episodes, we've been here 20 episodes. I don't know much about Karina, Anju, and Theo at all. I'm hoping the novels 1 through 3 give me more for them. Because I'm like, all I know about Theo is he sketches, and he had a relationship with Laughing Fox, and with the two guys that died, Daya and the other one. That's it. Anju, we know that she had a thing with Daya. She has had a past. We know that she has the tattoo or the scar. She cooks. That's it. And then Karina, like, she has a crush on Sheen that's very unrequited, very one-sided. And she had an older sibling that died, and she was hassled by 86. And that's it. I want to connect more with these three characters, but I know nothing about them. They're there. I mean, Raiden, and the thing that's so frustrating is Raiden, I feel like, character-wise with this season, we don't know anything about his past at all. We kind of get his character, but then they're like, oh, him and Sheen have had a lot of past, and a lot of things happen between them, but then it doesn't show us anything, so I'm like, well, but what was it? Can you tell us more, show? Can you give us information? Raiden said something about us having control of him. I think it's just that he's been acting weird because he just doesn't see a future in any of this. And he doesn't see a future like anyone else. He has nothing to live for. He's super depressed. And Frederica kind of gets that too. He's been weird since he left them. Yeah. Because he probably thought that, he went off to battle Ray by himself and said, well, I'm either going to die or save them, but he wanted them to get out. He wanted them to leave, and he wanted to go face his brother, and that would be their final resting place. They die together, and that'd be it. But he's lived past that, and that's why he tells Frederica, he's like, I feel like a ghost. I should have died back then, but I didn't. And now I don't know why I'm here. And he needs a silver-haired girl with a red streak in her hair to come and slap him across the face and be like, stop. You know, yeah. And I do like the framing of Karina is separated from the other three in this framing shot. Like, she's in the window and there's like some distance between her. Like, every frame of Sheen, he's by himself because that's how the show wants to frame him. And they're like, he's not going to be our Reaper forever. And of course they zoom in on the gun at that point. And Anju, I like that she says that she kind of knows what it's like to be not needed. And especially since Sheen was told by his brother that it probably hit him harder and he felt a lot of guilt from that. And all we've been able to do is ask him to stay with us until we die. But then what if they don't die? You know, he's had a mission to protect them, but if the war's over and they all lived, then what happens then? We were just relying on him and intending to leave him someday. And Sheen says that. He's like, eventually everybody's going to outgrow me and leave me because my purpose for them is going to be done. And that is really sad. I like that Sheen opens up to Frederica and we get that. But I'm like, I wish that Frederica knew about Lena to bring her up. And so that it could be like, but don't you have a relationship with this one girl? Don't you kind of do you want her to live? Like, yeah. Like, it does suck. It's like, I'm not sure this is the first time he'd say he'd go on ahead of us. They said the Republic isn't responding to radio calls. And then we see the Republic and all that on the little sign there. But I'm like, they weren't responding to the calls before. I'm like, I'm pretty sure. Then they do like the foreshadowing of they're like, I'm pretty sure they were wiped out after all. Now, could the country be wiped out? Sure. Is Lena dead? No. No, this show would not. It would make a fanfare out of her dying if that was actually the case. And they're like, I guess the Major wasn't able to catch up with us, right? It's like they all just stare at the camera. I'm like, yeah, she's gonna show up and be a Deus Ex Machina. That part is very clear. And so then Theo says, well, Karina, now's your big chance, you know. And then Anju's like, well, she's not a bad girl. She wouldn't do that. And I wish they would develop this more throughout the season, that Karina has this clear one-sided crush of him. Because then I'm glad Frederica is like being honest. Frederica suddenly becomes Genkai from Yu Yu Hakusho again. Like, she stops being a kid and becomes this sage, you know, with her sage wisdom. That she's like, oh, it's more of a childish admiration and possessiveness. I'm like, you were talking about cartoon drawings 5 seconds ago, Frederica. What? But she's not wrong. I'm like, yeah, call it out for what it is. It's literally just admiration and possessiveness. Like, is it love? I don't think so. Does she know about it? I'm sure he does. Does he love her back? No. So I'm like, girl, you might as well just take the sister route and go find somebody better. I do. It is hard to hear Karina get from Frederica that he doesn't see her as a woman. But I'm like, I don't think Sheen's caring at all about relationships at this point. He's like, you're someone you can count on. And she's like, yeah, I'm useful. I'm a good sniper. I'm like, girl, you should find somebody better than Sheen. I'm almost rooting for Lena to find somebody better than Sheen. Sheen is too needy. He's just like, he needs somebody to give him purpose. I'm like, stand on your own 2 feet, damn it. Be your own man. Be self-sufficient. Why has Lena got to pick you up and give you purpose? I would never date Sheen, for the record. I need somebody self-sufficient and able to take care of themselves and not rely on me to give you purpose for life. But you know what also is a tease about this series? Fido. Somebody said in the comments that you find out more stuff about Fido in the novel, and I'm like, I hope so, because I'm just like, Fido is such a mystery. And they tease us with stuff about Fido, but then they never give us any information, and you're just like... But yeah, I like Sheen saying, I'd feel better if I just went on my own. Because then he knows that they wouldn't be in danger. He could just go ahead and do it. But it's like, you, sir, would instantly die if that was the case. I have no doubt. No doubt. Right? And him carrying around the piece of Rey with him. So yeah, the title of this episode is Together Unto Death. And Raiden's kind of like, look, we were in this mess together at the start. We're going to end together. Right? I do like the visual of the butterfly that's slowly eaten by the ants. You can look at that in a lot of different ways. The butterfly on the tracks, like, is it the Legion slowly being eaten apart by the 86 and Geod? Is it supposed to be Morpho? Is it supposed to represent Sheen as this butterfly that now no longer has an ability to fly, that's being slowly eaten away by his insecurities? You can probably like symbolically break it down in a number of ways. I like that the general's asleep and then Mantis Man is like, let's go. And so they're like, it routes through your consciousness. Then they go back to this same spot again, only it's nighttime. And what do they say here? They're 120 kilometers west of the old border. We could march all night and still not catch up. Okay, so the old border, that possibly means that it could be a way for Lena to catch up with them if she's near the old border, if she knows where to go. Maybe that's a way for them to catch up with her. I don't know. And they're like, I think a sharp blade should be put to good use. If we can use that blade a long time, all the better. We can't have the Legion taking them. Which I'm like, yeah, that we need them to get back. I'm like, yeah, when some of the army is like, oh, just let the 86 go and let them. I'm like, you do realize the Legion would take them, right? Wouldn't you want to help them? They're on your side, right? I like Mantis Man. He's an interesting character. I especially love Berthold. I love Winslow coming in to like the tent and it's just like covered in cigarette smoke. It's just like, it just feels hazy. And she's like, I like Berthold's character. He's probably my favorite of the military men. And he's like, are you worried about him, Sergeant? Just in case you brought all these extra spare parts and everything, right? And then I suggested you go back to the rear and you refused. And she's like, yeah, no. she's like, bitch, somebody's got to come up and do this. They'd make fun of. I like that he says, what does he say there? He says, if the kids come back and they after catching their big centipede and all the old men are drinking, we'd never hear the end of it. And I was like, that was so funny because then, you know, you think of San Magnolia where every time Lena walks by, there's all the old men and all the guys drinking on the job. And she's just like, the incompetence. And here Bernholdt's like, well, if we did that, that'd be stupid. So I like that Bernholdt is a man of principle. He's like, not going to let that happen. Right. So yeah, then they're going through and figuring out what's been wrong with their equipment, and they go through everything. Like they're just showing that there's stuff happening with their equipment and they need repairs, but no time for that. Only the Undertakers. And this part here, I do like the angle in which they shoot, just going through it, but it is sad we don't actually get to see the battles where they lost the blades or anything like that. Like even if it was like a montage of things like that, but we don't get to see it. And then we see Fido with the extra stuff, right? Don't get crazy. And then it's like, let's catch up to the Morpho. I do like the shot of the tram with the vines and stuff through it. And then the shot of the San Magnolia statue in the shadows. I was like, just foreshadowing that we know nothing about the state of San Magnolia right now. And Lena's in the shadows. She's just waiting to come out, you know, to be our Deus Ex Machina. I would bet a lot of money on it that's going to happen. And then, because we have here our 6 little daisies. We have the 6 daisies. We have the 5, 86, and Frederica is the tiny little one beside them. You know, just in case you're keeping track. And then we see her. She sees all of the stuff that they saw on the way to face the Legion while they're passing through. She sees all of that, and they see the sea of the grass, right, that looks like the ocean. And again, Fido and everybody's on one side, Sheen's on the other. And they talk about all the things that they could have done when they were younger and that they'd want to do once the war's over. Like going to see the ocean, going swimming, going to Tropical Island, seeing the sea of ice to the north. And there are definite shades to Attack on Titan and 2 characters from there. I'm going to wave my hands, and while I'm waving, that means there are Attack on Titan spoilers. You could say there's definitely the whole thing about the ocean and Attack on Titan is a big symbolic thing between Eren and Armin. And the 86 are kind of like Armin, and Eren and Sheen are very similar in certain aspects throughout this show, which is fine. But you know, there is the ocean metaphor of going to the other side. And in this case, it's the other side of war. So that parallel is not lost on me. So yeah, end of Attack on Titan spoilers. But yeah, but Sheen just doesn't see. He like opens his mouth like he's gonna say something, and they all look at him like, "You gonna add anything about what you want to do?" But Sheen doesn't have anything that he wants to do. He doesn't want to see the ocean, right? I do like the idea of him sitting out there and getting onto Fido, being like, "Do what you want." And the thing about it is Frederica's like, "Oh, you're talking to Fido, huh?" And they don't explain what Fido is. It's frustrating. But anyway, he makes her coffee or cocoa or something. And she's like, "You looked at the scenery and it was beautiful, but you were disinterested in humanity's survival because the beauty only exists because there are no humans here." And on the one hand, that's so sad because yeah, there's beauty there without humanity ruining it. True. But I think they only think that because their only experience with humanity outside of each other is the Republic, which are garbage, and, you know, some of the 86 that are either like them or, as Anju and Karina have noted, can be bad too, or that Kirschblut noted. But I'm like, but there's still good in humanity. They just haven't been able to experience that yet, right? It's like, I'm a little conflicted with that. I think that is true, that part of nature is untouched, but then the things that they want involve connection with humankind. So I'm a little bit torn about that, honestly. Yep. The reason you're so disinterested in your own lives is because you don't see the value of it alongside others. And then she says, maybe that is the scenery that the Legion wants. And I'm like, how sentient are the Legion? Do they have an AI consciousness, or are they just, I feel like they're just ghosts. They don't want anything. And that's kind of what Sheen gets at. He's like, well, they're ghosts. They don't want for anything. They're just driven by the unfinished business of their pasts. Literally, he's like, Kiri is driven by unfinished business of not being able to protect Frederica and the Republic, or Jihad. He's like, his brother was, you know, plagued by the unfinished business of Sheen and their past. So Sheen's kind of like, well, I had unfinished business too with Rey, but now I've solved that, but there's nothing on the other side of the rainbow for me. So he's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, ghosts aren't supposed to want anything. He's like, I haven't been able to want anything since then, and I don't want to see the sea. I don't have anything I want to do or any place I want to go. It's not even being able to have something small you want to do. He's like, our conversation at dusk, it's bizarre. And she's like, when you left the 86 districts, you were able to decide everything for yourself, and you had this freedom. And he kind of clenches his fist there. And it's like, it was fun because I thought it would be over. He's like, yeah, it was fun and I liked those times, but I thought that we were about to die. So it was like savoring our last moments. And he's like, then we didn't die. And now it's like, oh, we have to deal with what's beyond. And it's like, yes. And I like that the show is getting at, you know, acclimating. You kind of have this do or die mentality, but then it's like, once you're past that and you're to the point where you know you're not going to die, you do have to come back. You know, it's the thing, dying is easy, living is harder. And Sheen has fully realized that and is realizing he doesn't know what to do. And I'm like, dude. And he said, we survived, unfortunately. And he's like, what? And he's like, I was supposed to die. And then he's like, I'm not Kiri, but I used him as an excuse. I want to keep going, but my brother's not on the other side anymore. So I needed another goal to take his place for a while, and that was Kiri. And she's like, but you're looking at the mirror the wrong way. You're not as cold as you think you are. She's like, you're a softie. And I'm like, yes, Sheen very much is a softie. He just doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't want to admit these emotions. He just wants to ignore them. And then what I like about this moment is her saying she wanted to free Kiri. And then she's like, but I'm scared of Kiri dying. And I feel like Sheen in this moment, he's talked about her being like a younger version of him. And I think it definitely comes back in this moment. She is afraid of Kiri dying like Sheen was afraid of Rey finally getting put to rest. Because then what do you do afterwards? Right? What happens then? She's like, I don't want to lose him. And then the worst part is she's like, the Confederacy doesn't need a kid like me. She's like, I'm from the old regime. If I stick around, I'm technically a liability. I could start a war if people know I'm alive and get the wrong political idea. She's like, so she kind of is addressing, she's like, look, I'm kind of like you. I don't really have a purpose either of being here. But she's like, I want to keep living. She's like, I could start a war. It's better for everyone if I'm not here, but I have to stay alive, at least to put an end to my knight's life. But when Kiri dies, I won't have an excuse to live, and that scares me. And I like that I wish he would have came out and reached for her hand, because she clearly is feeling the same things he's feeling and going through the same things that he is. But she's like, you're terrified of going forward because you tried to look directly at the dark, untrodden path before you. She's like, you shouldn't be ashamed of it. She's like, not having any wishes is the same as not wanting to be alive. And he's like, I'm the only one of us who still isn't truly alive. I'm like, you just need Lena to show up to give you a reason to live, honestly, at this point. And then he basically addresses everything they said, that eventually, I like that we cut from the 4 of them sleeping in their little group to the 4 rocks that are eventually going to leave him behind. And then, yep, and then the Legion's arriving. Da, 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 da. So we have episodes 21, 22, and 23 left. Obviously, next episode, we're going to be launching this attack. I don't know if it's going to end on a cliffhanger or what it's going to do. And then we have episodes 23 and 22 and 23 to wrap things up. And then I get to read the books, since y'all told me to wait. So, we'll see. This episode was fine. I like that we're working through some things with the characters and setting some things up. But my God, Lena, you have got a fixer-upper. Like, girl. So, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down below. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more 86. Bye.